Be real. A visit with a mushroom can jolt this imperative into clarity, and it becomes part of the homework for us who seek to have an ongoing relationship with a mushroom. Today is a valuable conversation which embodies this virtue, and is relevant to every human. We all need each other's insight, so contribute yours in a comment. Subscribe to Psilocybin Says on YouTube and podcasts if you're new, and connect on Instagram and TikTok.
All right, we're going to do this. All right, so hey, folks, this is probably going to be one of our shorter episodes for a while. Courtney and I haven't sat down and talked. We were going to sit down and do a recording about the crazy news around Synthesis Institute filing for bankruptcy, and Field Trip Ventures is closing a lot of their ketamine clinics. There's some major stuff happening in the world of psychedelia, but because that topic centers so much around authenticity, being real, if you're going to be a psychedelic leader, we got started and realized that there was some stuff that we needed to talk about that is relevant to our audience for sure. That if we didn't address it, we weren't going to be living that authentic self and being that self that we know is crucial to a sustainable psychedelic leadership. So, what are we talking about today? What's our fodder for discussion today?
Well, so we've had a really, really hard past couple of weeks. Safe to say, It's been one of the harder periods of time in a while. Between health stuff and family stuff and losing power for 4 days and being separated in the midst of all that challenging stuff and confusion. It has been kind of like a test of our teamwork abilities. And we're still kind of going through it. And it's highlighted for me the opportunity that I have as an individual to either like take responsibility for my own role to play in circumstances in my life, versus the opportunity to point my finger and just blame someone else and just say, like, I don't want to deal with this. Like, you deal with this, which isn't helpful. And particularly when kids are involved, it is so important to work together as a team, if that is at all possible. And so I guess that's what we're talking about today, right? Is like teamwork and relationships, and particularly when making that decision, if it's like a conscientious decision, and I guess that's a part of the conversation, like doing our best to make conscientious decisions when it comes to procreation with people.
And partnership.
In general.
Yeah, and this really, in so many ways, backs into the conversation around psychedelic businesses and us having a psychedelic community, not necessarily business now, not for profit. I think all of this plays into the bigger picture, and yeah, that's what we want and have to be if we're going to maintain these roles is real and authentic. And something that occurred to me last night as I was doing the cultivation class with our ministry training cohort, that I was able to ask the community to send some intention, some support and healing energy, however you want to term it, to myself and our family, which is something that we wouldn't have done, or I wouldn't have done, I don't think, in the for-profit business world, because there was always this kind of separation of your personal life from your professional life. And I think overall that model is going to continue to fail. And one of the quotes that comes to my mind that I've heard frequently in the last couple of years, just kind of, I don't know if it's trending or if it keeps coming up in my world or what, but that the person you pick to partner with for your romantic partnership has more bearing on your success in life and the personal growth in life than any other decision you will make. And, that those decisions that I've made in the past are a big part of some of the challenge that we're experiencing right now. I've been divorced 2 times, and the potential for partnership just never was there. My attempts to try and save other people or be a hero or whatever ultimately just caved in on themselves, really. And, there's been an ongoing kind of cascade of consequences for those decisions, because I also had children with those individuals. Just kind of like talking through what I know a lot of people experience in this kind of scenario. You yourself have had such a fortunate upbringing that you had 2 parents who love each other very much and stick it out together and really do seem to be, partners with each other. And so I'm so grateful for that, because it's helped you become who you are. And now I can attest to the fact that having a high quality partner who is willing to have the tough discussions, who is willing to look at the big picture and not just point fingers like you're saying, and try to find solutions rather than, distractions, makes all the difference in the world. I'm probably speaking to people who are well on their way in that journey through life here. I don't know, but, I was in my 30s after my second marriage and came to this realization. And whenever you come to that realization and act upon it is the right time.
Yeah, it really does impact so much. And it's like going back to what you said about bringing up the state, like the authentic state that you were in going into the call that you were leading last night. I feel like, I was so proud of you and just feeling really grateful to be doing this type of work where we can do that. Not only that we can, but like it is really helpful for everybody else. Everybody that was on that call, like there were quite a few people that immediately spoke up and were like, thank you for doing that. And like, we want to help. Like, it feels good to actually be an active part of community and helping people. And in that model of like corporate America where you're supposed to just like leave your emotions at the door and suck it up and just like deal with what you need to deal with for the day and then step back into your emotions when you leave. Clearly, like that's not working.
Crumble under the weight of them when you leave.
It's like everybody feels it, everybody sees it. And I've certainly been there where even when I was a wellness coach, that was my job. And that was the organization. It was supposed to be a wellness organization. I wasn't allowed or asked how I was doing. And it greatly impacted my ability to actually show up for other people. Like how are we supposed to authentically invite people to do that when we can't do it ourselves? It's just so helpful for everybody to just have some time to let it go and then move on. And so, and like our ability to, with our partner that we're living with, our ability to show up with that person of course, is going to ripple out into everything else. That's the foundation. That's how we're waking up. It's how we're going to bed.
Which is ultimately how we show up for ourselves and how we relate to ourselves, right? I mean, that's what I continue to understand on deeper and deeper levels, is that everything is a mirroring. Everything is a mirror of what's going on inside of ourselves. Our partner is probably the most profound because, like you said, they're right there. Children alongside with that, they're right there all the time. And I guess it's on one hand, it's surprising to me how many partners aren't showing up for each other. But then when I take into consideration that this is a mirror, and I understand that most of us have not been taught to show up for ourselves. Most of us have not been taught that we are worthy of support, that we're worthy of acknowledgement. We have been raised in this polarized, dichotomized world of good and bad. And so when you do something that is human, that is maybe hurts someone else, as we all do at times, and we immediately judge ourselves rather than having compassion for ourselves, and then that reflects back out into the people that we're with, it just it can create such a snowball effect. And a lot of what I've been trying to do over the years is really unwind that. And you have been such a crucial part of that. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but certainly other conversations, how you were the first person that pointed out how horribly I talked to myself. I think I've moved well beyond where I was when we met. But your courage and willingness to acknowledge that, to say that out loud to me, was the beginning of a major transformation for me.
That feels good to hear. We just get caught up in life and forget how things used to be sometimes. And yeah, I did used to tell you, I feel like a lot more. Like, can you be nice to yourself, please?
I was walking around saying, Eric, you're such a dumbass. God, what a dumbass, Eric. And that was like the voice all day long. And this was the voice of my parents here ringing in my head. And they were not partners. They did not work together. They were constantly at odds with each other, and they were constantly criticizing themselves and each other. And it just passed on and on and on. And so much, if not everything, that this work with psychedelics is about is healing that trauma that was passed down to us. Some of it is from immediate life experiences, but we find ourselves in those traumatic current experiences because a lot of us are addicted to drama and trauma because that's what we grew up with. You had a very different upbringing, and I don't know, I guess I'm curious. I know it's been challenging for you to witness some of what I've carried into our relationship and my relationship with my children at times. But I'm curious kind of like how it is that you've been able to reconcile those two very different worlds and still feel comfortable in the world that you're in right now. Does that make sense?
I think so. I don't think it's a very simple, there's no simple answer to that, but what comes to me first is that it's like with any relationship that we're entering into, there's like a ongoing revisiting of and assessing, is what I experience, this good stuff that I experience over here, worth this stuff that I'm really having a challenge with over here? Is it not? Like, some days it feels like, just looking back to like when we were first together, and like here I am, like single woman, never been married and never had a child, and coming into divorcing family, twice divorced, and 2 children. And I initially it felt so good, like just being with you and being with your kids. Like I really just was really enjoying myself so much. It didn't feel like a challenge. Like there wasn't the challenge aspect of it until, of course, like the honeymoon phase passes, and then you really kind of start integrating your own life and asking bigger questions. Like, okay, I got my clothes here. I got my books here. I'm kind of here now. And now things are more of my responsibility. There's like, logistical things that I'm taking on, and I just feel like I felt like I have felt throughout our entire relationship that the growth, like me feeling like I'm growing as like getting to know myself better in a way that feels like positive enough. Like, yeah, there's been some really negative shit that we've gone through and really hard times. But like overall, I felt like I want to be here. Like I want to be here. I don't want to be anywhere else. I want to face this. Like I want to look at this. I want to face it. It's faceable. It's figure outable with you, because you have been so willing to look that stuff right in the face and have really challenging conversations that are required to like move on from it, become better people and a stronger unit. Like that's it right there. Like if it wasn't for that, there's no way.
So what is it in someone that allows them to do that? We have known in our personal lives and our professional lives, and I think it's important to say people who did use psychedelics on a regular basis. So like psychedelics are not the thing necessarily, right? They're a tool that's very helpful in kind of working through all this darkness and lightness. But you can still have those experiences and not be willing to have the challenging conversations, make the effort to bring about change, and so what do you think it is in an individual that allows for that?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know because I look at my family and I came from the same. We got 3 siblings, and none of them will have a difficult conversation about like a real relevant topic. It's just, look over here. Let's just not talk about this. And, I can recall being like in my teens and just thinking like, this is bullshit. People are just avoiding the reality of situations because they don't want to do the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. And, like it's kind of asking that question to me comes back to the question of what I often consider around free will. And like, I don't know that there is, I guess my current understanding is that, every soul is in some level of evolution, and that you just can't do something until you're ready to do it. So that, again, requires us to drop judgment of people who are not able to have those conversations, right? While trying to encourage them knowing that it's safe. Like, because I even though I think that I just kind of have to let go of that stuff with my siblings, for instance, or my parents as well, I definitely put in the effort and tried to encourage, like, my mom to go to therapy with me. We went to therapy, and she got up and walked out and never would come back. And, so while I can see a lot of the mistakes that I've made, I can look back and say, like, I've tried real fucking hard to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall having people in your life that encouraged you to like face the stuff that was uncomfortable to face, like helped you feel like that would be a positive experience?
The only person that comes to my mind immediately is a counselor that came in and volunteered at our school. I was at a Catholic school. He was a Jewish counselor that came in and volunteered. And I was, telling you the story how I realized a few weeks ago that when he was leading circles there, that I was co-leading them. I was doing what he did. And I mean, he definitely created a safe space for young people to, just explore and talk about what mattered to them. But that's the only place that I can recall it.
Wow.
So I just think like so much of this stuff, like even though I asked the question, what is the thing that makes the difference? Like things just are what they are. And that's part of the challenge when we're in relationships or a situation that is uncomfortable or we don't like it necessarily, is that we're wanting it so bad to be different rather than accepting it as it is. And nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to have the ability to grow into its better self without first accepting as it is in the moment.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Because there is this, like for me, when it comes to people that I really care about, and I feel like family, when you're thinking of someone that much and they've had such an impact on your life and you feel like they will likely continue to have such an impact on your life, like there's this constant dialogue sometimes of in the midst of conflict or disagreement, this constant dialogue of what can I do? What can I do to make this different? Like, what can I do to impact this situation? There's got to be somebody I can call, something I can say, like some action that can show them something. But yeah, like you're saying, sometimes that thing to do is just like give space and trust the process.
So, I mean, ultimately what it comes down to, when I think about myself and where I come up against this friction in my own life, is looking back at the choices that I've made and feeling not just regret, but judgment against myself. Going back to this negative self-talk. When I look back at my first marriage, I was laying in bed last night, Courtney and I was kind of reflecting. I was just like, holy fuck. Like, I was 19 years old. I had an affair with a married woman in a conscious / unconscious attempt to get back at my dad, who had cheated on my mom with my best friend's mom. And then after that happened, she had 3 kids, and I felt just guilty as fuck for messing with that family, and felt in the responsibility and the guilt and the blame and the shame. And so, went into a 10-year marriage there that was just fraught with massive challenge and mental illness and addiction and all kinds of craziness. And the thing that perpetuated me in that relationship was that judgment and shame of myself. If I look back at it, I think it's understandable why I did what I did. I grew up in a very religious, dogmatic world where, like masturbating is a sin, much less cheating on your spouse. And then my father goes and cheats on my mom with my best friend's mom. you know? And so like my entire world, and this was all at the same time that the Catholic Church was going through their sex abuse scandal. And so it was like everything that I thought was true was completely yanked out from underneath of me. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to do the opposite of what y'all have said because you're a bunch of fucking hypocrites anyway, you know? And so that, again, just led to this kind of ongoing self-judgment. And I realized last night that I, you know, in many ways, I've continued to do that. I've continued to judge myself for the things that I did in the past that were actually really understandable. Like there's an understandable sequence of events. And so I want to try to continue to bring that compassion into my own life and into the life of the people around me. You know, we've been challenging kind of stuff here lately with my son, and instead of having that perspective like my dad used to have to me of you just need to do different, I want to have the perspective that I'm slowly starting to take on myself as like it's understandable. Like it's understandable why you're acting out. It's understandable why you're behaving the way you are. It doesn't make it healthy. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing, but it's understandable. And there's a space here for you to kind of explore why it is that you're doing what you're doing without judgment. And that feels so much better than the, you know, past week of you just need to do things differently.
Yeah, it requires a sense of a calmness. What did Yoda say in Star Wars? Number 2.
Which part says so many wonderful things. Courtney just saw the first 2 Star Wars, or, you know, 3 and 4, whatever it is. I don't know. She just saw them for the first time, 4 and 5, in the last 2 days.
Yeah, I'd never seen Star Wars my whole life.
I'm that kind of a partner. I'm not going to let my significant other live her whole life without seeing Star Wars.
I'm glad I did. But Yoda basically said, like, as long as you're, like, at peace within yourself, or there's calmness within yourself, you'll be able to know the difference between the dark side and the light
anger.
side.
I mean, that was such a timely watching of that movie, honestly. I haven't seen it for years.
Yeah.
And it is, like, we are constantly given the choice to engage in light or dark. And it gets murky. It's really not always easy to tell, but it can be easy to tell because judgment, anger, hatred, criticism, all of that's not love.
I mean, yes, I had a extremely fortunate childhood with parents that encouraged me to do the thing that I was feeling motivated and driven to do, even when they didn't understand it. They were always open to talking with me about whatever I was going through. And like at the same time, there were times where like they're freaking human and going through a lot of crazy stuff, like at work and personal life and stuff, and individually. And there were definitely times where like neither of them were really capable of being present with me, understandably, because they're human. And like where my need to be like seen and like held was not like met by them. It was met with like frustration and irritation and anger. Like, cause when we're confused about something, like we're feeling confused and we're like, the things are coming out that don't make sense. We're trying to make sense of what's going on. That's confusing. And sometimes that comes out like anger. And like for a child, like depending on the child, it can definitely like come out like anger a lot. And like when I was having a hard time in school, when I was feeling like unaccepted, unwelcome, like I didn't fit in, my go-to was to get mad at my parents and find a way to pick them apart and like just be irritated with them. And understandably, sometimes their response was irritation back and like, don't talk to me like that. And like you do that one more time. And like, this privilege is going to be taken away, or like, just go to your room, or, like
parent stuff.
But like as a child, like reflecting on that, I felt like more shame for the feelings that I was feeling. And more unable to express myself and what was going on when it was already hard to find the words for what I was feeling, not knowing. Like, yes, I know that I don't feel comfortable at school, or I feel like attacked by this person at school, but I'm embarrassed about it. So I don't know how to say it out loud. And I'm afraid it's true that I'm unworthy. And like, as a child, you just don't have those concepts figured out. So, like even yesterday in the car, we are learning how to do things differently than our parents.
Yes.
And oftentimes I find myself in that, waking up to that loop of anger and lashing out at my children when they're confused, and lashing out at me and feeling personally attacked by it. And like, this is the way that I shut this down, get rid of it, is to lash out and just tell them to stop, or like, you do that one more time, you go to your room, or, same kind of thing, just repeating the behaviors that I was taught and how to deal with it. And like yesterday, this has been happening more, where like I pick up our son, who's almost 6, from kindergarten, and he gets in the car and, how was your day? It was really good. And we start talking, and he wanted something that I could not give him at the time. He wanted me to take him home before picking up our daughter. And I didn't have the time for that. That wasn't the trajectory we were going on. And I was like, no, we're going to pick up your sister first, and then we're going to go home. And immediately just started bawling, he started bawling, crying, and was really upset. And my first reaction was like, I felt my blood boil, and I was just like, I felt it coming, where I felt like, because I'd had such a hard day already, I just wanted to be like, stop crying, stop that. But then I realized, like, hold on. He's feeling something, and it's way too hard for him to express to me what that actually is right now. So I'm just going to like tell him I love him. Tell him when he's ready to talk to me, we can talk about it. And just had to let it pass. But like, man, sometimes it is so hard to feel out the difference between like what setting a healthy boundary for ourselves is, and like helping other people be aware of that boundary in a healthy way is tough.
And being compassionate on what they're experiencing and what they're that's the thing about boundaries, is they're not as like hard as we would like to pretend that they are. And this has been a part of your journey here in the last few years. It's kind of determining boundaries, and for me, I've had far too rigid of boundaries over the years, because my boundaries were just always crossed as a kid. Never knowing if I was going to be just like screamed at or whatever, praised. But it's like really like what you're saying here is hitting such a chord in terms of this partnership aspect, because raising children is such a fucking difficult thing to do. And if you are not in a partnership with someone who is like for real partner, and you're going to have different upbringings that are come into play as you try to, train and educate your children. And so it's just so important to be able to talk about, because like even I grew up in look, you're about to get your ass whooped. That's what's going to happen. And then it happens, and that is something that, while it's not ever been like a go-to for me, when we first met, I was still like spanking my kids at times, like a smack on the butt or whatever, and because I was able to hear your perspectives from someone that didn't grow up in that scenario, then I was able to, I think, make a better decision. And, I just want to say to you that I recognize that not only with me, but in our friend circle and our close folks, people often comment on how fortunate you are to have the upbringing you did, but like you didn't have a fucking Pollyanna upbringing. You've talked about anorexia on the show here, and you're just talking about your parents. Like that was a big part of my trip coming out. The last dose that I did a week or so ago was, like your mom working all the time, and how much you needed her and still do, and our kids do, and all. And it's not to criticize her, we're all just trying to prove our fucking worth. And that's where like this relates to partnership for me, because in our relationship between us or with my kids, or really within any interaction that I have with anyone, how I respond to them says so much about my sense of self-worth. What I do with my time every day, all day, says so much about my sense of self-worth. And I think that's, I don't know if that's like what this all ultimately goes back to, but I feel like it is a major cornerstone of being able to be in a healthy relationship where you can communicate whatever it is. Are you worthy of communicating your needs and your feelings, and for that to be heard and acknowledged in a safe, respectful way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. That's such a good point. I feel like when my cup, so to speak, is filled up, I am so much more capable of remaining calm and seeing through the clouds. Like when we're spending time with community, and like authentic community that really cares about us and we care about them, and like taking breaks throughout the day, the work day, and like getting outside, like all these things, like getting physical activity and drinking enough water, and like all those things that go into the wheel of wellness. Like when financial stress, like when we're feeling financially like comfortable to meet needs, like all those things play into our ability to just have peace through challenging conversations and scenarios. When we can have like the majority of those needs covered, then it feels like, all right, these couple things may be hard, but like I got this foundation here that's allows me to breathe.
And that's what I want to be able to give to my kids and to you and to our community, is this a safe foundation where you can work through your stuff, process through, and continue moving up that kind of, I do go back to, in my mind anyway, I see this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and, and I want to see all of us as actualized as we can be. And that's not going to happen through criticism and condemnation.
it's definitely a process. Like, it's such a process where it feels like you take a couple steps forward and then a step back sometimes, and so much learning and contrast is involved in that ability to take responsibility, like, for ourselves and our place in things. Because it does feel like sometimes, like, hold on a minute, like, I don't remember agreeing to come into this world and do all this hard shit every day. I don't remember agreeing to have these parents or this circumstance that I came into, being poor or being in an unsafe home, or like whatever it is for people. And so it can feel like, is this my responsibility right now? Like, back to the free will thing. Like, do I have an impact on this whole thing right now? Do I really? I mean, I feel like that's a pretty healthy question to, like, consider and feel out, and, like, have a personal understanding of, like, how far our impact goes.
Or that boundary, it's like, that's one of the questions that we have been, I think, struggling with over the last week or two, is like, to what degree are we responsible to this situation to play an ongoing role of support, right? And, there are definitely times when we have to cut that off. And, as hard as it's been for me with my mother in particular, it's been enormously helpful. It's been so helpful to not continue to expose myself to ongoing judgment. I think you've seen improvements in my general, emotional health since I have kind of drawn that boundary. And it's just not something that's easy to do, because, like, for one, like you're saying, we're in these kind of almost weird, interdimensional contracts with people, with souls, if you will. And then we're also in a relationship with ourselves where we have to determine, like, okay, where is my line of health and safety here?
Right. Like, that's part of the weird interdimensional contract, is, like, figuring that thing out for consciousness, like, as an individual part of that whole consciousness.
So do you have where do you draw that line? And I know there's probably not going to be here's the answer. You kind of, I think, maybe answered it to some extent about, the benefit versus the detriment in any relationship you're in. But, like, if someone, we've all been there before, either in our current relationship or a past relationship with someone, where we were trying to determine, is this worth it, or am I worthy of this or more?
Yeah, it is not black and white. It is, I feel like, a process of conversations with people that care about me. Like, if I'm in question of something that I'm doing in my life, like, if it's a work relationship, or romantic relationship, whatever, if I'm, like, asking myself regularly, hold on, maybe this isn't healthy for me, then I can only personally ask myself that for so long. Like, and usually that's like, if it's coming up regularly, it takes me, like, a few weeks if it's like regularly coming up for weeks, then I phone a friend. I'm like, can we get together and I need your feedback? Maybe this is a loop that is personal to me, that I'm making more out of a situation. I'm making it worse. Maybe this is me. Maybe I'm thinking maybe it's them or but maybe it's me, like in a place of resistance to leveling up personally, and I'm avoiding it or approaching it in a way that's not helpful. And like there's a very select few people who I feel like will be honest with me, like tell me what, out of true care and concern for me, will tell me what they think. And even then, like, they are in their own place of projection always. And that's the thing about community, is like, we can only get feedback from people and then take our own personal responsibility and like, feel that out and then bring it back to the person, the relationship that's challenging. Be like, all right, like, I've been talking with people and I'm hearing this and I'm feeling this about what they said. And now what do you think? And like, let's talk about it. And then like, it takes a while. It's not.
Yeah. I think what you're saying though is really valuable, because like getting hopefully unbiased, or as unbiased as can be, feedback from your peers and your surroundings, and then going back into the situation and bringing that information. And if the individual continues, or the situation continues to refuse to acknowledge these varied perspectives and then assess their own, participation in whatever it is, then for me, that ultimately becomes like, that's it, So like in situations where I've just been like 3, 4, 5 times been like, look, this is what I'm feeling, and I need you to like respond to me in a thoughtful manner. And if it just comes back as deflection and defense, and rather than like listening and responding thoughtfully, like, fucking how much time you got for that,
Yeah, at some point I feel like I know when it's time to move on from a situation that I've been unhappy in, when I become just disinterested in it. Like, it gets to a point where you just become exhausted and you're just like, genuinely, it's not even confusing anymore. It's just like, I just really like would rather be somewhere else. So I'm going to go do that now.
Well, I was going to bring that up earlier, though, the advice from Bashar, our alien friend, that going towards what excites you. And that can be tricky, because we can train ourselves to think that fear and anxiety are excitement sometimes, but like, if you can touch in on that sense of real, like, anticipatory, there's growth here, kind of excitement, curiosity, then it can be a lot easier than we make it out to be, honestly. We spin up in our head, but our heart knows what's right.
So this will feed into our conversation around psychedelic organizations, and like, how do we thrive as an organization, and a psychedelic one in particular, where like a big part of that is like looking at your shit and dealing with it, is that like, when a problem arises, like, this is a very corporate America type of thing, is like, assess how it affects the bottom line. If it affects the bottom line, then cut it out. And that oftentimes means people, and a lot of people sometimes, and sometimes very important people. And it doesn't work. Like, that doesn't work. I don't think that works in any organization, honestly, like really long term. but particularly one that's rooted in wellness and serving people. It is so vital that we as units, whether that's like a partnership or a family or a community, an organization, when hard stuff comes up, we come back to the core of the agreement and like what we're in it for, and move from that place. Like, what did we do this for? And like getting really clear on that, like in a marriage and a family, the intentionality, like let's revisit what we're doing this for. Like, we're not just doing it to like do it. We're not just, we didn't get together and keep getting together. And in our case, have children together to like, as a fun little experiment. Like, yeah, maybe a little bit, but also, like, because there's like long-term stuff that we're moving towards here, and big stuff, impactful stuff. Like, we're doing shit in the world. And so let's turn towards each other and like get curious about how we can grow from this, instead of like just cut each other off. Like, it just happens so much. I mean, like, divorce is clearly a huge problem right now and has been for a while in marriage, and it's a huge problem in the corporate world and organizations in general, is not knowing how to communicate with ourselves and each other.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you brought up intention here towards the end of this conversation, because I more and more, through psychedelics, but really through integration of psychedelic experiences, coming to see how crucial intention and coming back to that intention is. Why are we doing this? Why did we get married? Why did we, you name it. And if it's not infused with intention, then it's not going to last. And if the intention is, I think, not from a authentic, loving place, then it's also not going to last. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot in these psychedelic companies. I've got quite a few stories that I can relate to, having been at the early stages of the psychedelic gold rush, as it was called. But yeah, intention. Even this podcast, I think this may not be our most popular podcast, because it's just kind of like where we're at in our energy and all that. But the intention behind the podcast actually might make it one of the more popular shows, because our intention is to be really real, to share our real world experiences, help people understand that we desire deeply to grow and be as whole as we can as individuals, and bring that into the organization and the community that we're forming.
Yeah, well, that right there is such a juicy point. I love my juicy points.
Yes, I love your juicy points too.
That whole idea that like everything has to be exciting, like everything that we do has to be like a positive, uplifting conversation. Everything has to be pretty and sparkly, and like, no, we are over that as a culture. We're sick of just the pretty sparkly Instagram feeds.
Insta glamour.
Like, yeah, is it uncomfortable to see somebody like crying on Instagram? Like, yeah. Am I always in a place to look at that? No. But I will say that the people, Instagram is just, I'm going to roll with it. Like, the people on my Instagram feed that do show up in messy places and are like, shit's fucked up right now. I'm pissed. I'm like, there's tears running down my face and I'm really uncomfortable. I'm probably going to regret this, but like, I need y'all to know that like my life is really hard. And then they show up and like, they come out of it and they're like, they are uplifting and they do have a message and a learning from that. Like, is it uncomfortable to watch that? And do I like look for that necessarily? No. Like, am I like searching out somebody crying on Instagram? No, but
Who's
like
the most miserable fuck on Instagram today?
I know that person is putting themselves out there when it hurts and it's hard and really uncomfortable and doing the work. And that's just somebody that I'm way more likely to like just feel comfortable around, honestly.
And look for some kind of like camaraderie or support.
Yeah.
Or like, we are the same. Like, you're so right. And I'm so glad. I think this is also part of this topic of the big reveal and psychedelics. It's like, it's so funny to me. I saw one of these articles the other day where they were, showed someone in eye shades, a face mask, headphones on their psilocybin journey in a laboratory. And I was like, that's a fucking lie. That's a fucking lie. And it's not going to last very long in this world, in this industry, as it's being, called.
Yeah.
But overall, bigger as a culture, I think we're starting to see, and so much of it for me is reflected in our political environment and our corporate media, that we are constantly being fed a kind of like a script of what we're supposed to think life is, and it's not real. And we have got to, and we are going to get back to real humans having a real world experience and sharing that, and us being able to identify with those people. So I know that you and I are a part of that. I know that we are, particularly in the psychedelic world. Even still, you are going to have a hard time listening to a psychedelic podcast out there that isn't just kind of like talking about how great psychedelics are and how, so much healing that comes out of it. And this is what it's fucking ugly. I laid right there on that floor and drooled and snotted and cried for my mom and for my grandma, and like for hours and hours and hours the other night by myself. Thought I was going to die for a significant portion of it all. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful because it was real. And that's the hope that psychedelics offer us, I think, ultimately, is yes, getting in touch with the rawness and the realness of who we are. And, I just want to thank you for being able to, I don't know, kind of get ugly publicly, or to just like not be that Insta glamour gal all the time. I mean, you do, you got your smoothies and stuff.
Definitely lost friends over my lack of Insta glamour sometimes. But thanks. I'm really grateful for you encouraging that in me, and you setting an example for me and our family and our community so often. Even when I get pretty uncomfortable sometimes with
there's my
your
husband
role model
spilling his guts in front of everybody again.
But then I get feedback from the community and they thank me for like just encouraging you to do that. And I've seen so many times how it gives permission for people to let their shit out when they haven't had that ever, oftentimes in their life. And it's an honor. Like, it's an like, as long as it's not happening like every day. Like, nobody wants that friend that's like in tears
constant
every single
mess.
day.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
We're gonna get through this.
We're gonna need to move on now. But it's an honor when you do have a friend that like you have a lot of good times with and really enjoy being with, when they call you and it's like, I need you today. I need to spill my beans and like.
You'd have seen that men's circle last week. I'm still kind of wondering how a lot of folks are processing that.
I know, you came home and told me about that, and I was honestly worried. I was like, oh no, like I hope people can hold space for that today. But then like I had wives, or a wife of somebody who was there who approached me and thanked me for like the role that I have to play in encouraging you to do that, and how much it impacted her partner to be there in that space, and how honored he was. And she's a real motherfucker. She's not, she wouldn't just tell me that. And so
I know. Yeah, that was, man, I just I know that there's probably some folks listening, and I want to reiterate my gratitude, because that's something that I've been experiencing the last few years. After stepping away from retreats in Jamaica, and quite literally tens of thousands of hours of being there with hundreds and hundreds of people while they lose their shit. And that was the first time that I've ever lost my shit, which I did. I wasn't. I was like,
like, what does that mean?
I was
break that down.
Like on a 15-gram mushroom trip for 30 minutes, just snotting and snarling, and like there is this.
You didn't actually eat 15 grams of mushrooms.
No,
just to be clear,
but it was like I was
like
able
that.
to get into that space, thanks to those men that were there facilitating that, and thanks to myself for being able to go there, and thanks to the mushrooms for helping me, go there time and time again. But I've always only done that, kind of gone that far when I was alone. And then there's something very different about having people there to witness and to not judge you, and so yeah, it was, bless those souls. It helped, and it also helped to remind me the massive role that I have surely played in many people's lives, doing the same for so long, so many times.
Yeah,
and we all need that. We all deserve it, and that's what I want to do. I want to do to the fullest of my extent for everybody that I can, especially my family members, especially those who do that for me. So. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's probably a good wrap up. I mean, should I turn into my bear dragon right now?
No. Right. Well, I mean, if you're feeling that's what you need to do, go for it.
Bear dragon is in the cave at the moment.
Well, thanks for listening.